For you to sort of read my intention and my level of openness leading me into it is absolutely critical, because you take us into a very vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And holding space for that, and knowing that we're safe, or I am knowing that I let me own this, knowing that I felt safe within your professional hands was really huge.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Flip Your Mindset. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and today's guest is Liz Murphy. And I'm so excited to have Liz here. So Liz was actually introduced to me by a former client. And I guess they must have been talking, and maybe this other person was talking about her experience and having done some work with me. And lo and behold, Liz ended up on my calendar. And I had a chance to meet with her and work through her that way. And I asked Liz to come on because what I really wanted to be able to go over was her personal experience using rapid transformational therapy and the coaching model that I created around that. And more specifically, how that differs from some of the other healing modalities that she's worked through and with, such as plant-based medicine, ayahuasca, psychedelics. Psychedelics and plant-based medicine is such a hot topic. And I love the fact that somebody can come on and speak about it authentically and be able to talk about it in comparison to rapid transformational therapy. So thanks for joining me today, Liz.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me here. It's an honor to talk to you.
I always love seeing your face and all of your jewelry. You're always inspiring me.
Oh, thank you. Well, you haven't got your hat on today. Normally you have your hat on.
I don't normally have on a hat, but not today. Not today. So Liz, you were brought to me by someone else. And I'm just curious, I guess we could start here. Like, what was it that you were seeking support in or help with that caused you to even listen to what that person was saying to you and have you even engage, say, in a discovery call or a consultation?
So that's a great place to start. So first of all, the person that recommended is a friend, my massage therapist, and we go deep when we're on that table, and she not literally, just digging into me, but emotionally as well. And she was sharing her experience with you, and it really just spoke to me. I don't know that there was a particular stage that I was at, other than a sort of gradual build-up of wanting to break through some barriers that I was becoming more and more aware of. And, I, as you mentioned, I've had a good amount of experience with psychedelics and plant medicine just in the last 5 years, and it's been transformational for me. And I know how I roll in terms of my patience with this stuff. I have a lot of childhood trauma that I knew was brewing, and I had delved into and obliterated a whole load of that with ayahuasca and psilocybin. But what it also does, it brings up those dregs that are really deeply ingrained in me. And I realized that I was still facing some real blockages. And I could choose to go down the therapy route, and some of my best friends are therapists and really brilliant, and I don't want to dismiss or undermine the value of what they do. But for me, I'm a sort of all or nothing kind of person. I'm a designer, I'm a creative, I'm an expressionist painter, my whole mojo is, being authentic and showing up, and I paint from inside out. And so I am all about, moving as many boulders and blockages out of my way as a creator, but also wanting to show up in my human state as fully and as expansively as I possibly can. And one of the key things that really resonated with me when Reese was talking about you was my journey in relationships, and realizing some of my past patterns and the type of person that I was attracted to, and felt familiar, the dynamic that I would feel familiar in was kind of fucked up. And I had been, for example, I'd been in my marriage for 23 years. It was very dysfunctional underneath the surface. On the surface, it looked fine. We got on well. It turned out, without wanting to disclose too much, but it turned out that my ex-husband was gay, and we lived a very sort of non-intimate existence. And I could see that my pattern with dating and men was somewhat avoidant and fearful of intimacy, but also craving it at the same time. And, 23 years of not being in a very intimate relationship that turned out to be a complete fabrication, complete lie, sort of set me up to go, oh shit, I really need to get my neuro pathways in a different groove, that I'm not going down that avoidant, narcissistic, arrogant route, which was sort of where I was, I could see I would easily be drawn. And so what I realized that it had come down to was my feelings about myself and self-love, self-acceptance, and what I was deserving of. And so to sort of get through the weeds in terms of talk therapy felt like I would be walking through weeds for a long time. And so having done a little hypnotherapy years and years and years ago, I was like, I know that I have to blast through some blockages. Tiptoeing around them, for me, that just doesn't roll. That's just not who I am. I throw myself into everything. I, like, bring it. And then I can go, oh,
that's kind of how you were when we had our consult, after you shared what you shared in your consult. And then I shared the different ways that I work with people. And one of which was Rapid Transformational Therapy, which is a form of hypnotherapy. You were like, let's go. Let's just dive right in. And I was like, great, let's rock and roll.
I also loved who you were. We had a great conversation. I just, your whole essence and the way you approached it was just like, yeah, she's my girl. And this is really, this is what I need right now. And so, when you put it out there in the universe, beautiful things like you show up and you go, oh, okay, that's my route that I need to do right now. And so, it was an intention of coming at RTT with a desire to break through into a deeper, darker side of me that I knew was not helpful, that was holding me back. And so I felt that I could completely trust you. You are very, you just get it really quickly. And I love the build up that we had. And so it just all felt right. So yeah,
it did feel right. And I think, what people don't understand is from the practitioner's point of view, right? Whether the person's a therapist or a coach or a licensed mental health counselor, like, we also have to feel the connection on our side in order to attune.
Yes.
Right? If we can't attune with our client and we cannot feel that level of trust, because as a coach, a little bit different from a therapist point of view, as a coach, it's not uncommon for us to also then share some of our maybe common struggle in order for you to see that you're also not alone in the journey. And so as coaches, as practitioners, as mental health professionals, we're also using that time to assess, how's this energy, right? Is this energy going to produce what is going to be best for the client? Because if as a practitioner, we can't attune, it's not going to be best for the client. Because we can't show up in our most authentic self. And I know for me personally, in my authentic self as a coach, I'm very clairaudient and I'm very clairsentient. I feel a lot. People call that empathic, but I also hear a lot. I hear a lot of things that are not being said. And so in order for me to tap into that gift, I have to be able to attune to the client and just flow with what's being said. If as a practitioner, we feel when we're meeting with somebody for the first time that there's going to be that block, it's not going to be in the best interest of the client either, right? So we definitely had like a super good
Yes.
Open energy flow, right?
Yes,
I'm remembering it.
absolutely. And I think that's really critical. And for you to sort of read my intention and my level of openness leading me into it is absolutely critical, because you take us into a very vulnerable place.
Yeah.
And holding space for that, and knowing that we're safe, or I am knowing that I let me own this, knowing that I felt safe within your professional hands was really huge. The other really beautiful thing was that as you were talking, it sounded more and more familiar. And the beautiful synchronicity was that you trained under somebody that I did ayahuasca with. And so as you're talking, I'm like, wait, I know this. This sounds, it sounded really familiar. So it also was another entry point in for me. Which was beautiful.
Let's talk about that. So the person that you're talking about is Marissa Peer. That's who trained me in Rapid Transformational Therapy. That's who developed this therapeutic model. And I guess you were at a retreat that was going to be utilizing ayahuasca, and maybe Marissa was there as like a keynote speaker or some sort of expert, right?
She was. So it was a beautiful place in Costa Rica. I was there for 2 weeks, which was thoroughly indulgent and very extreme. But in Liz Murphy fashion, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm really in. Like, not just a week, give me 2 weeks. And so, yes, she was there as a keynote speaker, but she was also doing ayahuasca with us. And so we had it was a really cool, all of this work needs a backdrop to hold you in. And, I that you can't just go into this, I was going to say extreme, but you can't go into this really deep work without some infrastructure around you. And where I could sink into in the Costa Rica one, it was an amazing organization that really had a lot of theory and support around it. And Marissa did sort of a course beforehand and took us into all of this. And then she was around as we were doing ayahuasca for the week that she was there. So there's a lovely synchronicity. I'm like, oh, I know this. Yeah.
Yeah.
It felt
so
really
let's talk a little bit. I want to kind of stage this out for people. So you had done ayahuasca. You knew, is it fair to say you knew going into that experience that you did have some things that you still needed and wanted to work through from your childhood? Is that fair to say when you went into that 2-week retreat? Okay.
Yeah. So what really prompted me for the ayahuasca was, I had found myself, I was recently divorced. I had just had a cancer diagnosis. And one of the things during my marriage that had kept me married for probably longer was a unconscious fear that if I divorced my husband, I would get cancer and die, which I hadn't really surfaced in my mechanism. But that was what happened to my mother. Now, I know it's a false belief. It's an inherited belief, but it was ingrained in me. So when I got cancer myself, first of all, I was like, oh my gosh, well, that's it. I'm going to die. And secondly, I was like, no, this isn't my story. How do I shift my story and go into the reason that I got cancer so that I never get it again? And so I also wanted some guidance on how to treat this and how extreme to go. And I have a spiritual practice. I have a strong belief, I wouldn't say it's a religious belief. It's not packaged in any way, but I have a really, my relationship to the divine, to the universe, to my spirit guides is really paramount in how I live my life. And intrinsic in some of the decisions that I make. And so I wanted to be able to get into some kind of walk through some sort of portal that I could hear and understand on a much deeper level. I think it sort of started there. And I didn't go out looking for ayahuasca. Ayahuasca found me. It literally came out of the computer and grabbed me. And I was like, wait, what's this? Wow, okay, I'm coming. And then it was very clear I needed to go for 2 weeks. So it wasn't something that I was
you weren't looking for it.
It really chose me. And
I've heard that from other people, by the way. I've interviewed other people. Erin Maloney was on my podcast and she said the same thing. And I think it's one of those things where it's the law of attraction, actually. When you know that you need something and you have the courage to speak it out, either to yourself or start setting intentions in some way, shape, or form, and there's a part of you that believes that you're available to receive it or that you're worthy and deserving to receive it, then the universe can respond.
Right.
And so there must have been some sort of internal intention that you were creating, because when we create these internal intentions, we're all energy, right?
Yes,
so now we're kind of creating this vibration that's a little bit higher, that is able to be met with something higher. And I hear it very often, I didn't go looking for it, it found me. And sometimes that can work at a lower vibration too, by the way. But when we're clear on that and we can intentionally set a higher vibration for what we want, all kinds of crazy stuff can come out of the woodwork.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself? So I want to try to lead that from the ayahuasca to, coming to me and doing the RTT work. So what was that ayahuasca experience like for you? And what did you learn that was profound for you in that moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I learned so much. It saved my life. But moreover, I learned that we actually have the answers inside us. Now, with Grandmother Aya, that's a spirit. But what became very clear is that, my life's journey and all the decisions that I've made and the place that I was at, I had a deep knowing inside me. I just needed to access it. I needed to know how to tune into it. And that was really empowering. And having known that, but sometimes we need help to get there, to get deeper into that. And I realized, having done ayahuasca, that there were many answers and perspectives that I realized would be very helpful in unfolding and unpacking my life, moving forward. And that, this Western medicine, I wanted to go to the divine. I wanted to go to the divine in me.
You wanted to connect with that higher source.
Higher source, that's it. And the transition from that to you, and I have done a number of psilocybin ceremonies. I was doing them every month for, quite a number of, for a good year. And then I recently did a big psilocybin in October. It's a very, there was a similar knowing that I would get to that deeper place in me. Now with plant medicine and ayahuasca probably being the most powerful, I knew that I wasn't going to go as deeply into that, but I didn't want to. But the desire to go into the hypnotic state is sort of getting rid of the noise and the clutter. And I'm very ADD, I'm a typical artist. I've got a ton of noise going in my head and thoughts. And I know, just from painting, which is my sort of hypnotic state that I go into, things become much clearer and a path sort of can open up, or just my tuning into my higher self becomes much more attainable. And so coming to you, it felt, oh gosh, this is a door that I can walk through that will help me get there deeper than I would do on my own, and not as deep as ayahuasca. I didn't want that, but that I could open up and shine a light on something that I was struggling to do in my own realm.
You just created a perfect segue, because one of the reasons, and you and I were talking about this off camera, one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is there's a number of them. Number one, you have a great Instagram presence, and you're really honest when you're showing your process of your actual artwork, of how that is in alignment with sometimes part of your spiritual work and your healing work, right? And so I knew you might be open to having more of a public conversation about this, but The other reason why was because in my particular space of trauma recovery and trauma work in general, there is a huge spotlight right now on psychedelics. And I know a handful of trauma trained therapists that are also psychedelic trained, plant-based trained. The conference I normally go to in May, the Trauma Recovery Foundation that's led by Bessel van der Kolk, who he wrote The Body Keeps the Score, a very famous book.
Mm-hmm.
The entire conference is focused this year is on the psychedelics. So it's becoming much bigger, much louder. There's a great documentary on Netflix. Like it's all just becoming a little bit more quote unquote mainstream.
Yeah.
And so what's happening in my particular space is people are asking me, how is this different from the work that you do? Meaning you get people into this hypnosis state, which really for people that don't understand, a hypnosis state is just in neuroscience, a theta brainwave state. It's just when you're in a flow and you're in a zone that you're almost in like a daydreamy state where things become clear, like Liz said. You're not zonked out. Nobody can make you do anything that you don't want to do. You just have been able to access a higher level of self, which is like your subconscious, right?
Yes.
It allows you to unlock your subconscious. Now, when people ask me this, I can't answer it well because I've never done plant-based medicine. I've never done psychedelics, but I knew you had. But I also knew you had and had done this kind of work with me before. And when I've interviewed other people on the podcast that have done plant-based medicine, they've not worked with me before. So you mentioned ayahuasca, psilocybin gets you kind of into this hypnotic state, which was a perfect segue because the rapid transformational therapy is done under a hypnotic state, right? It's done under hypnosis. Yeah. So how did the hypnosis work that you did with me differ for you versus going on an ayahuasca retreat or doing a psilocybin ceremony or an ayahuasca ceremony? What is the difference in the experience?
Yeah, great question. So I guess, first of all, my intention for them was both the same in terms of opening up to a deeper, more authentic part of me and expanding and deepening my healing. And so I came at all of them with exactly the same mindset of openness and trust, that I was called to this, that it was right, that I was meant to be doing it. When I came to you, I had realized that there was a slightly different shift in my own paradigm, in that the ayahuasca blasted a whole load of stuff open and healed me on a physical level and all kinds of different things, which I can go into if you want to. But just to say, that was incredibly profound, and it opened up a world to me that has become the most nourishing, the most expansive, the most exciting phase of my creative life ever. And I turned 60 this year, and I've had 5 years of amazing creativity, success, recognition, and so I was receiving all of this, and so much of it was because of the portals that I was able to, and the understanding, the healing that happened in the plant medicine, but I wasn't able to receive it, and there was a deep mismatch in my worthiness, my sense of worthiness.
Right.
And I don't know that I even knew that when I was talking to you, or maybe I did. But I didn't. I wanted to be able to receive it fully and own it.
Is it fair to say that when you went through those experiences, you got a deeper clarity and understanding of maybe how some of your past experiences had impacted you, but you had not connected the dots to how that connected to this lack of worthiness or inability to receive any kind of praise, accolade,
exactly.
Right?
That's exactly right. Really well recognized there. That there was a little gap that I knew was sort of there was a mismatch, and I couldn't receive all that I knew, the infinite possibilities that we have on offer to every single one of us, if there wasn't a sense of worthiness and deservedness and self-love and self-acceptance. And I was struggling with that. And so that panned out in terms of my relationships, how I engage, not just romantically, but how I engage with my friends and how I engage with my family, and what I'm able to receive as well as give. And so I wanted to understand what was blocking me there.
Yeah.
So it just, it felt like it was almost like I'm stepping into an elevator. I only needed to go down or up a couple of floors. I didn't need to go right the way through. It had bubbled up enough for me to know and trust that something would open up. I didn't know what.
No, we did your work together in the summer of 2022, which is like so hard to believe, because I know, because we're recording this in January of 2024. Because I'm thinking about, like, when did we do this work together? And it was the summer I went to Big Sur and I went to California, because I remember it was the set. I just remember all of that. And blessed for me, I do remember all of my RTT sessions, which my clients, which I don't know how I have the database capacity for that, but I very explicitly remember a lot of the scenes that came up for you in particular that were really impactful and profound, just to listen to them, and what people don't understand is, as the practitioner, when we go into this very sacred space that we're holding for our clients, the way that rapid transformational therapy works, I should probably lay that out for people because I don't really talk about it on my podcast, is, when I work with somebody in RTT, it's part of a bigger program. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I've created something called the Get Flipped Intensive. It runs on kind of a fixed schedule of somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks, depending on everybody's schedules, but it's done within 2 months. And it's basically 4 coaching sessions that are conscious level coaching sessions that encapsulate a very intensive 2-hour rapid transformational therapy session. So week 1, you do some coaching. Week 2, we get much clearer on what we want to try to break through, or at least gain a deeper understanding of. Week 3 is this intensive 2 to 2.5 hour session that's done under hypnosis, that's methodical and systemic, because I'm using rapid transformational therapy, which is a method to help guide the person. And then the following 4th week is another coaching session. And then a few weeks after that is another coaching session. That rapid transformational therapy is systemic, as I mentioned. And the first thing we do is we induce somebody into hypnosis, which is not nearly as difficult or challenging as people think it is. It's kind of like a deep meditative state. So if people are used to meditating, or like you said, you're used to putting yourself into this hypnotic trance, not just with plant-based medicine, but just when you're in your flow, when you're doing your art.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I get you to that space where we can allow the conscious mind to fall asleep and get sleepy and kind of take a back seat, and the subconscious can be really driving the car. And I will have worked with you over the first 2 sessions together of what is it that you'd like deeper clarity on, right? And I think it's fair to say you want a deeper clarity on, why can't I receive this stuff?
Yeah.
Why can't I feel this about myself? Why can't I believe this about myself? I hear it, but it just kind of rolls off of me. I'm not even comfortable taking it in. And that's hindering my relationships, as you mentioned. So you wanted to get to a deeper understanding of that.
Yeah.
That's the
Let
goal.
me just say, you are so masterful at this, Stacey. What was really very clear and very much fed into my trusting is you really hear me. You really heard me. And what I loved was that I could talk and just throw up a load of my gunk, but you were able to, in those first 2 sessions, really pinpoint some of the more critical aspects of what I was talking about, which I didn't even recognize were critical. and sort of lock those in. So when it came to the hypnosis, your guiding was very, very poignant and very curated. And it felt like I was walking down a Liz Murphy tunnel that was put together by Stacey, but it was like, oh yeah, this is the, it wasn't alien in any way. So the deep, and I may say, I've had hypnosis by a number of different people. Sometimes I've gone deeper, and where we were, there was noise going on. I was conscious of, there was talking in the next room, right? And there was other stuff going on, but which I was aware of, and I was aware that I was lying on a bed. So at no point do you feel out of control or that you're in some weird, wacky thing, which is weird and wacky when you're doing psilocybin and ayahuasca and all that kind of stuff, right? But I knew it was familiar with me to take me to that place of surrender and trust.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Really, that's really important to have that mindset. If I go in fully, oh my gosh, I'm scared, I don't know, then you're just not going to get the fullness of what you have to offer. So my practice with the plant medicine really helped loosen my trusting surrender muscles. Also my art process of leaning into the process and not knowing what's going to happen at the end. I didn't know what would happen at the end of our journey. And it's the same with my art. When I stand at a canvas, I don't know what I'm going to be painting. I don't know what's going to unfold. And I certainly don't ever know what the end result is going to be. And so I would say, if you're thinking of this as a listener, just know that that's a really helpful, healthy state for your offering.
Yeah, that is a great analogy with the canvas, by the way. And I think it's also really, really important to understand, just like there's all different kinds of artists and baseball players and musicians and anything that anybody's doing. Everyone does it a little differently, right? And I can be honest and say that I know one of the things that makes me very good at what I do when it comes to the RTT is my trauma training, because I'm very attuned and I'm very aware and I'm very keyed in to listening, because I'm taking people to places where it may or may not be what looks like big trauma, but what's going to come out is going to be something that was processed as such. And so if I get the sense,
exactly what happened with me.
Yeah. And if I get the sense from somebody, say week 2 or even week 3, when they've come in for the RTT session, and I can feel that there is a level of holding on like this, I'm not going to be like, well, it's week 3, and so therefore we have to do it. Like, I'm going to be very aware, and I'm going to say, listen, if I sense that someone's not ready, I'm just going to say, what's your comfort level? And if they say, I'm not ready, then you're not ready. I mean, then we take more time. Okay. So like, it's really important for people to understand, if you engage in this process. And I say this because a lot of the people that I work with, some of the quote unquote unhealed trauma response is people pleasing, inability to say no, deprioritizing themselves. And so if I'm working with somebody where this kind of has become their method of operation, they may not feel comfortable to say to me, I'm not ready, or no, or they might
you don't
say
know what you don't know as well.
Right. And they may not say to me what they want to say because they're afraid it's going to bother me. So I'm attuned enough to understand all of that.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
And to be able to say, look, are you comfortable today? Because if you're not comfortable, we'll just push, like, we may never do it. If that's your comfort level. And then we strategically reorganize the investment that you've made, and maybe we'll do more coaching, whatever it is. But there is a level of surrender, and not everybody's comfortable with that.
And vulnerability as well. I mean, I think that's the other thing is
I can only think of one time really where that I've had to do that. And I think the reason why is because by the time somebody's gotten to this particular session with me, we've already met 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah. And those, having not done this in this format before with anybody, I can so completely understand that. And you're very generous with the amount of time and attention you give at those stages, and the investment that you make, certainly with me, felt, really admirable and so helpful.
Yeah.
So,
And I think, thank you. And I think it just does set the platform for somebody being willing to offer me the space, right? Because that's really what it is. I'm honored to hold the space. So let me explain to people what happened. So we get you into this hypnotic state. We'll use Liz's as an example. She wanted to know why she wasn't able to receive these things. And she wanted to be able to connect with people in a different way, right? In a more honest, authentic way. And you had a lot of understood barriers from my perspective as to why you might be blocking deep, meaningful, close relationships with people, right? Because there was a younger Lizzie that got really hurt by that. And we knew that. So once we get you into that state, we start to really just ask your subconscious to go back to the root, the reason, the cause for this inability to connect at this level. What it was some vital, vivid, crucial time where maybe this started to develop. And it's amazing what happens, because I always remind people, you might go to something that's like kind of a foreign memory to you, but more often than not, you're going back to a memory of something existed. You've thought about it many times. It might be something you think about all the time. But to Liz's point, you were seeing it with greater clarity.
Yeah.
I always say it kind of reminds me of a Christmas Carol where the guy is going around and he's flying with all the different ghosts and looking at other parts of his life. And he's watching himself in that moment. And it's like you're watching yourself from above, in a sense, right? Where you're observing an experience you had, and you're observing it by you seeing your younger self in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And the questions I'm asking you, what is that person feeling? What is she feeling? What is she experiencing? What is she hearing? And how is that affecting her in that moment? Who can she go to with that information? How can she process that? What did she learn about herself in that moment? What changes did she make in her life because of that moment? That now is the lens through which you're still living life, but that happened 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Right?
That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
We use
and that's where the similarity is with the plant medicine. But the difference being you're guiding. With the plant medicine, it's it's a more spiritual energy that takes you into, but it's the same thing with ayahuasca. One of the most beautiful things is you get to look at your life from above and see how everything fits in. Right. You do that very beautifully. That has many similar parallels to that.
Yeah,
so for me, that's what I want to see. I want to be able to see why that happened and what I need to learn from that. And I don't want to have that happen again. And I want, I want to clear my stuff. So my pathway, my runway is much, much more open.
When you're doing the ayahuasca, is it fair to say you're with a group of other people in the same room at the same time?
Yeah. One thing I just want to say quickly on ayahuasca is that there needs to be a level of alignment, of a spiritual backdrop. There needs to be a whole load of stuff that you have to have in place in order to do this. Just going in for a one-hit wonder quick fix is really dangerous.
Yeah. And
it's not dangerous, right? This is just really good work. It's very, very, it's like a really great touch point that is very, profoundly healing, and the alignment still needs to be there, but it's not as critical. I mean, it can obliterate you if you don't have that with ayahuasca.
I think that's a really fair statement to make. It kind of leads me to what I wanted to talk about, which is, and I may have used this analogy with you when we work together, is I see when we're doing the RTT work, like we've done some work together, we've walked hand in hand on a path in those first 2 sessions. And now we've kind of come up to this big, very dense forest. And it's kind of packed in. It's like a round sphere of dense forest. And there's a path that goes through it, and there's a path that goes around it. And when we're doing the RTT, what we're doing is we're going through. And the way I see myself is I have gone through that forest for myself maybe 25, 30 times, right? Where I've learned what that experience is like. And then I've gone through it probably 100 times with clients. So I know where there's going to be pain. I know where there could be potential major breakthroughs. And I think of it as like there's going to be logs that we're going to trip over, thorns that we're going to brush past. And I'm either right next to you or just right in front of you or just right behind you with a big lantern. So there's light. And so it's scary. It's maybe not going to feel the most comfortable. You might get bumped and bruised and scraped, but there's someone with you one-on-one the whole time walking through this forest. And when you get through it, you're not the same person that started at the beginning. And that's the gift of going through. And we hear that all the time. The only way is through. The path around that forest is the path of least resistance. You can take it. But the problem is when you come around the back and you're meeting up where somebody might have gone through the forest, you're not going to only have one forest in your life. You're going to have many, right? These are the challenges, hurdles, obstacles, adversities that we have in life. When you've learned to be able to go through, you have a greater understanding of you're now more resourced. You've proven to yourself you can do hard things. You've proven to yourself you can have these big, difficult feelings that we tend to learn how to run from. If you've taken that path of least resistance, the next time you come up to the forest again, you're not as nearly resourced and you don't have that level of clarity anymore. So what I see as myself, and you've used the language a lot, is a guide. Like, I feel like I'm guiding you along the way. And one of the values, I think, of RTT with a really well-trained guide is exactly that, versus maybe being part of a ritual or being part of a retreat where you might not have that one-to-one hand-holding, support, guidance, and the appropriate questioning to be able to ask to help the person process in that exact moment, because you're processing directly to me, right?
Yeah, all of that and a whole load more. Yeah. And your guiding is it's very gentle, and it's never very nice walking through our shadow.
Right.
It's never very comfortable looking at the things that have damaged us and hurt us.
Right.
So it's much easier to take that path less traveled. But I just want to reiterate that it's not scary, because there's actually nothing new that you are finding out. Where you took me back to, what happened with me is, through the 2.5 hours, I got to a moment in my life where I was 8 or 9 years old. It was a memory of me in my junior school. My parents were going through a really, really bitter divorce. Now, I hadn't thought about this moment for 50 years. Like, it wasn't something that I had thought about, but whatever happened, wherever you guided me through that forest, that was sort of at the core of the forest.
Yeah.
And I got to it and I was like, oh my gosh, of course that's where that neuro pathway got deeply ingrained in me. And what happened, what I saw through our journey together, was this little girl that, during my parents' divorce, which was slimy and horrible, and my mother had been given 6 months to live, and I've been separated from my twin. It was horrible trauma that went on in my childhood. But in this point in time, I was standing in my junior school, and all my friends, my classmates, were allowed to go on this French trip. And they were all, this particular moment, they'd all come back and they were all talking about them. They'd all become much closer, and they all had these stories, with a 9-10-year-old girl, all these little cliques that were going on. And I felt completely alien from that, and undeserving, that because of my slimy, dysfunctional state that I was in with my family, wasn't worthy enough to go. Now that's bullshit, right? Of course I was. But in my little Lizzie, I was like, oh, I'm slimy. I'm not as good as I don't deserve that kind of trip. I don't deserve those close friendships and to have that much fun because look at my family of where I'm coming from. So you do you, and I'm just going to keep separate and not get close to you because I'm not really one of you. And that little thought or massive thought that I was not even conscious of,
right,
impacted so much of my decision making growing up and as an adult, and continued to do that. So what was so beautiful and brilliant and poignant and really powerful was that moment, and when you took me to there, and then we could lean into that, and you could blow it open and retrain my neuro pathways to think differently or to see it and to give what that little Lizzie needed. I didn't even know she needed that acknowledgement because I wasn't. So, so that was my
and
experience.
It's such a great example because, when we talk about trauma, it's the reason why I ended up becoming a trauma recovery coach, because when I was first doing RTT way at the beginning, it is these kinds of memories that would be popping up for people that didn't seemingly on the outside look like, I'm going to put in quotes, trauma. There wasn't, in that particular scene, there was not an abuse or an aggression or a violence. But what I knew from those kinds of scenes from way back at the beginning of my practice that everything was being interpreted as trauma. And let me explain that. So trauma is never the event. Okay. Trauma wasn't that Lizzie didn't get to go to France. Trauma was the interpretation she made of herself in that moment, which is I wasn't worthy of it. And that's the wound. And because you may have not understood the language around that feeling, and or you may have not been in an environment where it was either safe or capable for you to even express it, it left a wound that was unhealed. Yes. And then everything left in life is in process of through the lens of this unhealed wound. That's why I'm trauma trained, not trauma informed. It's a very different thing. I'm trauma trained. And I got trained in trauma because that is trauma for people. And if I can help somebody heal the wound, then we can actually really start a transformative healing.
And that's why hypnotherapy is so freaking brilliant, because it identifies and shines a light on the wound. And so until you know that, you can't start your healing.
That's right.
So, I'm sure talk therapy and all the other amazing modalities, you may well get there. I'm not very patient with this kind of stuff.
That's kind of the beauty of RTT. And hands off to Marissa. I've said it many times. She was brilliant in creating the methodology. There's no question about it. It's a game changer for my practice. But the naming of it is even brilliant because it is rapid and it is transformational and it is therapeutic. Yes. And so to call it Rapid Transformational Therapy was honestly, I don't know what kind of focus group they did on that. It was a brilliant name for it because that's what people receive. Now, it's important for people to understand that are listening. There are times when people come to me because I've heard about my work in RTT. And when we meet, I'm very honest with them. And I go, I don't think that's the place for you to start. And sometimes, and you can relate to this a little bit, somebody might be coming to me where I truly believe we all have childhood wounds. I don't think anybody's scathed, right? It's just some wounds are deeper than others. Some are less healed than others, so on and so forth. However, if somebody's coming to me with their unhealed childhood wounds, which is not uncommon, but also simultaneously in triage and crisis, that's triage time. So for example, I see a lot of this. I work with a lot of women that are currently in narcissistic relationship and or in the process of going through a divorce or quote unquote a mediation, which is really difficult and almost impossible with somebody of that type, or just on the other end of it. And they're in recovery of that. And there's a huge amount of grief, and it's a massive clusterfuck to go through this kind of relationship. And if somebody comes to me and they're in a state of being because they're living in an environment that is traumatic in the moment, I may not recommend RTT in the moment, because sometimes that person just needs the space to be held to process what is going on in their current moment.
Yeah, you're still too raw. And having said that was exactly the place that I came to you at. I was about to enter, I've been divorced for, I don't know, 5 years already. And I was about to go through a big renegotiation with a mediator. And I'm ready to fight a battle that with a, somewhat of a narcissistic behavior type person, and
in that case,
and to feel strong and worthy to be able to fight it, I knew I needed some infrastructure.
1-2 punch. And that is when it's great in that kind of scenario, right? Because sometimes, Liz, I'm not just working with somebody that's like in the middle of either the recognition that this is no longer sustainable. So they haven't even started any kind of dissolution of the relationship. And they're like, what am I even looking at? And they kind of have become woken and now showing up and coming to me like to process, or they're in it and maybe even living with that person still. Right. So again, triage.
Yeah.
Where they're just on the other
100%,
end.
100%.
When someone's coming to me that's been on the other end of it for a while, your children were a little bit older at that time. So we're not in the process of like true co-parenting or parallel parenting, right? So there's about as much distance as you could get with someone that you have children with. That's a great time to do it. But when you're in that triage, and I say this because I don't want people to think the only way to work with me is with the RTT either, because I'll recognize quickly if that's not going to be the most beneficial to you in this moment, right? Or if somebody's come to me and they've never done any work, they've never done any therapy, they don't even know how to label their feelings. I see that a lot. This is like their first step ever in a healing journey. I'm not going to jump you right into
like
RTT.
ripping a bandage off where the wound is still pussy.
Yeah, no, we're not doing that.
No, you can't. It just doesn't. No. It's too demobilizing. Yeah.
I will always say to the person, listen, I really go with what I know, and I know this space well, and that's not the right step yet, right? I'm not saying that we won't get there, but I'm really honest in letting people know if I think that they're even a good candidate for it or not. So it's important for people to know, even from that perspective, I'm going to recommend what is going to be most useful to you in this moment. Just get comfortable with even labeling a feeling. I get a lot of people that come to me very disassociated. They don't know what it even means to feel or even be connected with their body or their emotions, right?
Yeah.
So there's varying levels. So this
you just put the hypnosis just shelve it until you get to that point.
Shelve it. And if we need to get to it, we get to it. But sometimes people come to me and they've never learned how to trust anything or anyone. And I honor that space. That's huge. And if you're willing to even be willing to explore a feeling with someone, that sometimes is a massive step for someone. And I recognize that. So I just lay that out there because
it's a bit like tuning into a radio station with you by my side going, just turn it a little bit to the right, turn it a little bit to the left, and then sitting and listening with me. And at first it might be in a different language and you're sort of translating, go, this is what they just said. And then you can start really hearing it and tuning in yourself a little bit more, that opens you up into a deeper way. But unless you start with that, okay, what are we doing? Can you help me? It's, you're not even hearing anything. So, I would say also, not that I'm a great meditator, but, allowing yourself some stillness and silence to be able to pre-game to you as well is really important to be able to just sit and listen to what's coming up and not having any answers per se, but just bringing them this is a sense, this is what there's a sense that this is what's going on, but not, and then you help tuning in of refocusing.
It's a really, really good, and you're so good with your analogies. And I want to just, we're going to wrap it up, but when people go through this kind of experience with me, and they're finished with that RTT part of the program, and there's still more coaching to be done after that session, I'm always letting them know, I want you to just be aware of and be mindful of over the next week or 10 days, whatever that time space is in between, like some micro shifts on how maybe a certain situation might come up that in the past you would have acted one way, but now you're actually approaching it a little bit differently. And Liz, I remember yours so well. And it was so, I'm going to put in quotes, benign, but you caught it. And I only know you caught it because you brought it to my attention. And it was really interesting. You had gone away with, I think, a group of gals, maybe to Detroit or Michigan or somewhere. You were going for something for art, maybe for an art festival. And you knew that you had a propensity for migraines. Is that right? Or some sort of headache. And, you said, it was just the smallest thing. There wasn't enough sleeping for everybody, and someone was going to have to sleep on a couch. And I knew that if I slept on the couch, I wasn't going to get a good night's sleep. And if I didn't get a good night's sleep, I was going to be at risk for a migraine. And then that could really just throw off the whole day. And I found my voice and I just said, when everybody was asked the same question, who wants to take a bed and who wants to take a couch? You said in the past, you might have just stayed silent and not said anything. And you just had enough courage to say, I'll take a bed. And that was such a shift for you.
Yes. Yeah, I know that's thank you for remembering that. Yeah, I know. I would have
these little things.
I don't know whether it's English upbringing or whether I want to be kind, but I also, I might have in the past thought, you take one and let me be the kind person and hand it on.
But that's how it is.
I need this. And so that was a big moment. And what I would add to that is, it is very much like a ripple that keeps, or the gift that keeps on giving, because what I found that comes back to this worthiness thing, and believe me, this is probably going to be work for the rest of my life. It's not what I would say, and maybe for some people it is a really good deep fix, and it was a really good deep fix. But I keep having to remind myself of that. Oh, here's that worthiness thing again. Oh, you know what? That's coming up, and I can go back to that moment in time that you took me to as my little 9-year-old go, Lizzie, you deserve more than that. You deserve to be part of that. You deserve to be loved. You deserve to be seen and heard. And so I can coax myself back into a bit different mindset, a different neuro pathway, but I still have to keep reminding. But having that visual and that experience to tap back into is it continuously helps me move my healing barometer around, and I will be using that probably for the rest of my life.
And I think you're right.
Until I don't need it.
There's no such thing as fully healed, right? We're always on a healing journey. Our whole life is a healing journey. But to your point, the neuroscience behind the efficacy of that is that our mind loves to work with pictures and images and senses and smells and colors and tastes. And when we can help ourselves create an image, it is very powerful. The mind loves it.
It becomes more powerful when you have an image. And believe me, I'm a very pictorial person. I think in images, I think pictorially. But to have an image and a feeling associated with it, or the negative feeling, and then override it and reframe it with the positive, that's where the power comes. That's the fuel.
No doubt. There's no question. That's a perfect way to end it. So guys, let's just all give a round of applause for Liz, because you have helped me today be able to explain. I can explain it from my seat all the time about how powerful rapid transformational therapy is and this program that I've developed around it. But the way that you described it, the imagery that you actually created for your experience, in addition to having tried other methods and therapeutic ways to try to tap in and how it's different, has been so useful, honestly, even just for me. And so I'm really, really grateful that you said yes to me when I asked you. Because I had actually had a little sticky note on my desk for quite a while.
Oh, really?
Liz Murphy, because we have a good energy and I knew, but I'm also very mindful. Like I respect
personal stuff. Yes.
I respect the anonymity that people want. So it really did sit on my desk for probably a good 6 months. And then I had this courage of like, she can just say no, and that's okay too. Right?
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm really honored. And I'm just, I know I'll be coming back for more at some point. And, I work with a lot of artists and, I would encourage them to do this too, or anybody that wants to get deeper and more aligned to their truest essence. This work is beautiful. And
we need to partner up and do a retreat together. How powerful would that be?
That would be really interesting. Yeah.
Could bring a lot of guided hypnosis to that. So anyway, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. This, I know, is like double length of a typical podcast episode, but I knew it would be. And I think there's just a lot of value for you guys to hear of a therapeutic way, a model, a method that can be used for your own healing journey. And if it's for you, great. If it's not for you, but you know of someone that could be great for, you know where to find me. So look, it's Flip Your Mindset. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast so you can always be notified of when a new episode like this one drops. Liz, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you for your beautiful questions.
Oh, thank you. And guys, stay tuned. There's more to follow.